again, as always. Nate Mumford, Director of Sales Engineering here. Time for another RCS Live. And today we're joined by Dawn Newberry, our Aquira traffic specialist, because today we're talking about Aquira fillers. That's right. The idea that you have your inventory is undersold and either have a network program and you need to make sure that you have 3 minutes, a full 3-minute spot block, or maybe you have like added value, added revenue for one of your larger clients and just want to give them some added bonus in there as well. As we'll see today, Dawn will talk about some tips and tricks and how to make sure you can maximize your filler abilities. As always, doing some housekeeping first. Don't forget, we're out and about. You can check us out at Texas Broadcasters. We're going to be in Ontario. We're going to be in Ohio. We're going to be in San Diego. And I always tell users, while you're there, if you want to come and bring your, database or whatever, we can talk shop, right? Bring your database. We can talk about some tips and tricks on your database. Otherwise, we can just talk about any other product you want. Zeta, G-Selector, Aquira, audio display, Revma, whatever you want. We could talk about that there too. So some great resources for you. And of course, speaking of great resources, we always have our archive over at rcs works.com/rcs-live. Over 150 how-to videos of tips and tricks, including some from the Dawn Newberry in Aquira as well. So let's just dive right into it. And let's talk about Aquira fillers, right, Dawn? So first things first, let's talk about setting up some of these fillers. And we're going to start with setup and stations, correct?
Correct. You have to first determine the time frame that you want those fillers to schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to each station. You go to the day parts and time segments tab. You'll see here I have a lot of day parts, but these are customized. You can call them whatever you like.
Mm-hmm.
I've set up a filler day part.
Ah.
When I click on that, you'll see the green, and when I hover over, you'll see that it's assigned midnight to midnight, Monday through Sunday. I'm sorry. And what that means, when the filler process it gets kicked off in logs, Aquira is going to look at all the contracts that have been marked as filler contracts. It's then going to look in here and see the parameters for when they need to fill. For this station, it's going to go midnight all the way to midnight and look at all the breaks based on their rules and fill what needs to be filled.
Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of like saying a first step is, hey, you're allowed to fill during this time frame. So it's like an all or nothing. So it's saying, hey, from everywhere you're allowed to fill versus something like this, which is maybe have like a morning show, right? Where you don't want Aquira to fill your morning show because that's where you make your revenue. And so you can essentially isolate that so that Aquira doesn't have the ability to schedule filler spots during a particular day part.
Correct. Like this station, I only have it set up, as you'll see, from midnight to 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. But then on the weekends, I have it midnight to midnight.
Yeah.
So it's only going to put spots in midnight to 6 a.m. Monday through Friday.
Awesome. And those could be obviously station specific, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Based on your station.
So
go
ahead. Yeah, no, please.
I was just going to say the next step that you want to look at would be the breaks that are in those clocks. You can control the filling of each break by setting up some different rules.
And that's setup and clocks, right? And then log breaks?
Right.
Yep.
So this is just a generic log break. It's got regular spots that fall in it. It's a minute in duration. But down here, you'll see filler and filler rules. There's several options here. Of course, always fill the log break. That means whether there's a spot in it or not. If there's 30 seconds in a 60, I need to fill that completely. The do not fill if log break and contiguous log breaks are empty. Drag that out a little. In Aquira, you can put breaks back to back. And Aquira looks at that as one break, but they're really kind of two.
Yeah.
So if the bottom break is full, but the top break isn't, this option would say, okay, I need to fill that top one because the bottom is full. And then do not fill.
Don't
that,
fill.
Of course, is, don't put anything in there, period.
And so hopefully, as you can start to see, we're kind of building this. We're establishing behaviors in Aquira. And now, is there a difference, like in the field? Is there a preference between like saying just keep everything all, like it's always allowed to every break can fill, every day part can fill, versus very specific times of the day? Do you find that there's a preference either or is it really just station specific?
It's mainly station specific. Those that have a lot of network syndication would probably want to always fill those
Hmm.
mandatory, so they would set those. But say a music station, the PDs like to put as much music in as
Yeah.
they can instead of just fluff. So you might want to always have those as do not fill.
When I was a PD, we used to have a floating middle break. And it was essentially the 30 or so. If we had spots to fill, we would schedule it. If not, we'd move some stuff out of it. So in theory, maybe you have something like a 3 spot blocks an hour. The first spot block and the last spot block are, yes, always fill. And that middle one could be a do not fill. So that way, if I don't have any spots, I can just get rid of it.
Correct. Yep,
Awesome.
exactly.
Awesome. Okay. So we've done the overall day parts, we've done the individual clocks and the log breaks. What's next?
So now you want to enter your contracts.
Okay.
Here is a filler contract that I have in. Filler's going to be designated on the spot lines.
Mm-hmm.
I got multiple spot lines here. You'll see on this particular spot line, I have some spots booked Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, but I also have the weekends. I have gone in and checked this box. So this is what Aquira logs look at to say, I can use this as filler.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it on the spotline level. So this means if you need a regular that's a 60, then you can utilize this particular line. There's some options to control how that filler happens. On the contract overall, you can choose here in fillers, spot on day. You can choose different methods, any day or spot day. Spot on day means exactly that. If I have on this spot line, spots on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, this filler will be available. It's not going to be available on Tuesdays and Thursdays because there's no spot.
Yes.
Any day, the option any day means just that. Whether it's on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, whatever day, it's always going to be there on the log to show.
Are there more
And then,
methods than those two, or is that the two kind of primary ones?
yeah, that's just the two methods.
Okay.
And then you can also set access, and what that means, we have any log and network. If you have a network and you want this contract to fill for all the stations on the network, you could choose that.
Mm-hmm.
Log means I just only want this specifically on a particular log. So you can choose that there.
Awesome.
And once you get the spot lines down and you have this designated, you can also control the filler on the spot line level. So for instance, on this one, you might only want to use this filler. Let's say it's in for a really long time. Maybe you just want to give them some filler on certain days. You
Mm-hmm.
can control that here. You can give it a rate. Here you can say, okay, I want to give them a maximum
Mm-hmm.
number of spots. Whoops. Because, in some situations, if I don't put a maximum here, what could happen? I could have on this line, I have 92 spots.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't put a maximum, this client could theoretically end up with 92
Yeah.
paid, but they got 120 free.
Yeah,
Which,
you've told Aquira that I'm allowed to fill in this day part, I'm allowed to fill in this log break, and I can do unlimited fills. So yeah, go to town.
so you can put that number there, increase that as you like. Then you can control how many spots per day. So if I were to say I wanted 10 spots on this particular filler line, you could theoretically have all 10 of those scheduled on one day if your logs, need a lot of filling. So you can put on here a maximum per day. Maybe you only want to give them 2 per day. So you can control that there. And then if you have created spots, I put down 4. I still have 4 to create. This just lets you see how much filler is left available. Once we get that done,
Mm-hmm.
we can click on to the, oops, I didn't get,
Okay, put your end date
there's
in there.
the, yes,
One of those gotchas Aquira's got.
yes. It will bark at you, definitely. So Because based on that any day or spot on day, you also have the ability in media to control what media airs on what spot. So I can have this particular piece of media that I'm going to put in for every single spot, whether it's filler or not, doesn't matter. I would just go down here and choose the day part. We're going back to that day part that we set up. That's what Aquira looks at. But I did not choose filler day part on this one, so this spot is not going to run for my filler. I've selected a generic spot. That way, if let's say the client is having a sale on Mondays and they want the Monday spot to run, if my filler is set to any day and it ends up on Tuesday, I don't want that Monday spot, so I just maybe have a generic that says, hey, just come by and visit us any day, and the paid spot might be more specific.
And you can also just have two of the same spot, one marked as filler, one marked as generic, right? Because then in theory, you're having they always use this generic filler, but the other spot, which is technically between you and I, the listener here, is the same spot. However, what we can do is essentially say, I can always have this being the filler spot versus I can override their main campaign,
Yes.
something like that.
Yes. You can designate on each what you want to run and when.
Nice. Okay.
So that's really convenient. The next thing that we're going to move into will be the logs. Now that we've got contracts, we've got the day parts established and the times, we'll go to logs. But before you go to your log, you might want to check this option, which is called fillers available.
Traffic fillers available. Yep.
If let's say this is a slow time of the year, maybe it's the holidays, the first of the year, and you don't have
summer here in the States.
Inventory. Right. You don't have a lot of inventory booked during that time, but you know you're going to have to fill. You might jump over here, look at this, and this tells me for these dates, this is the filler that I have. You can see if you've created filler, how many you have left available. And then if you only have a couple of contracts that are going to run maybe around the holidays, you might want to go and put in some filler contracts. And then we're going to get to our logs. Now that we have all that established, we're going to look at the log and see how that process happens. And here is just a particular day that I've picked. I've done my log. One of the last things that I'm going to do is fill that log. That's a really simple process. Here in the logs browse for this individual log, I can click on filler. You'll see this box come up. These are all those contracts that have been marked as such. And when I'm in here, let's say I need to just fill a couple of breaks. I can just drag and drop if I want to. I can drag this in as many times as I want, unless I put those restrictions, the maximum per day.
Yeah, the max.
So if I wanted to pull this in 100 times, I could until that contract is over based on the rules. I can just individually do it. I can choose the ones that I want to automatically use, or in this case, I'm just going to check all of these, and then we will kick off the process. So I've selected all of my contracts, and then I'm going to go to the parameters. Because this is a midnight to midnight day part for filler, I want to try to fill it all.
Okay.
So I usually use some really large, crazy number.
Yeah.
So that it will do that.
Because your inventory will override that, right, Dawn?
Yes, the inventory is going to stay, and it's only going to look at what's available. So we'll see in a minute. I put 100. We'll see how many it creates.
Yeah. Simply put, like if you had, for example, if I have 50 spots a day, if you say create 100 fillers, it's only going to fill up to 50 because that's the only inventory we have as defined by Aquira.
Right, exactly. And you mentioned before, if you only want to fill morning drive, here's where you could control that as well. I could put a start and end time, but if I put nothing, Aquira is going to utilize that filler. We go back to that filler day part that I set up for this station was midnight to midnight. So that's what we're going to look at here. And then I just hit create fillers.
And the allow clashes is also kind of important too, because the allow clashes, sometimes you have a network programming, you kind of have to have 3 minutes, right? And allow clashes might allow you to actually say, typically I wouldn't do this, but because I need 3 minutes, I'm going to allow clashes on this particular station.
Right, and that means I'm going to just totally look over the advertiser
Hmm.
conflicts or the product conflicts and just let it all happen.
Yeah. What's most important to you in that scenario?
And so in this instance, I did create 100
Okay.
because this was an empty log. And so now those are all on there and those are ready to go. And my log, for the most part, is finished. I assign the media. It's going to then process all the media that we've designated. But one of the last things in here, if let's say I'm doing a couple of logs, maybe I'm
Hmm.
doing weekend logs and so forth, I can highlight those, and from this browse screen, I can hit fill, and
Mm.
then it's going to run through that same
Yeah.
process for all of
Oh,
these.
wow.
I just don't have that control of selecting who and what here.
Yeah.
And then it's going to tell you, okay, I couldn't fill some,
Okay.
so you might want to go and look at that.
And that could be
And then
station two, right?
that'll
Because
do.
if you have multiple stations, you can do control click across multiple stations, right?
Sure, you could choose the multiple stations here and bring those up for a certain day and then choose what you wanted.
Nice.
Yep.
Like you could, in theory, say if it's tomorrow's log, I can say bring up start date today or start date tomorrow, end date tomorrow, all the stations, do like a control A or something, and then do fill, right?
Right. You could certainly do that. I think I picked August up there. But yes, you could pick one day, like your example was,
Yeah,
and
I
I'll
got you.
say, okay, yeah. And so those are the days for those two stations, and I
Yeah.
can click that right there, highlight that, and they will do the process.
Ooh, I love that. I
Yeah,
love me some
pretty-
work smarter, not harder, Dawn.
yeah, that's real efficient. I like that. So that's cool, but that's the filling process.
That's awesome. So let's go back and review from the beginning. So the idea is that we want to first tell Aquira what day parts on what stations are allowed to fill. Then we define in the clocks what breaks are allowed to fill. And then we have at the contract level, is this contract allowed to fill? Or more specifically, and how it's allowed to fill, either, spot on day or any day. Spot on day being that if I have other spots scheduled, then I'm allowed to fill. If no spot is scheduled using the method spot on day, we won't schedule it at all. And there's also really creative ways that you can incorporate media into this as well, because you can essentially isolate your filler with some generic spots so that from a traffic perspective, it's going to be great. We always have those options there, right? This is our no dates, no times, just generic. Hey, it's Dawn's restaurant. Come by and for a great meal, right? It's always generic filler on there as well. And then after we define the media or the spot lines and the contract perspective, we can see exactly what spots could be filled utilizing the traffic fillers available. This is especially important if you're running a little slow and need to see what Aquira has available to schedule. And then finally, we have the log structure itself. We can essentially say, hey, drag and drop these fillers, schedule these fillers, and all of that great stuff, right?
Yep.
Anything else you want to add in regards to fillers, Dawn?
No, that's it. I think you did pretty good backing me up there.
I
Good
love it.
job.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So don't forget, we got some great videos with Dawn on our archive, rcsworks.com/rcs-live. You can check those out, and we'll see you again for another